First time I tried to record this video, I started crying. Second time I tried to record this video, I got a phone call. But here we are. Homegoing. Homegoing by Gayasi. I'm an honorary Ghanaian, so I should be able to say this. Gayasi. Guys, I always feel like I start every single one of these videos like, guys, you need to read this book. But I think I think I picked some pretty hefty books. Now, quick backstory. 2016, this book is published, and there's loads of hype around the book. And I'm, among those people that want to read a book. And I must have either purchased it at the end of 2016 or at some point early 2017. Because I was about to travel for work. So I'm in the American embassy getting a visa. And I got my book and I'm like, okay, let me start because I don't know how long I'm going to be in the embassy for. Let me start reading. I read this much, that much alone. And I go, I ain't reading this. I ain't reading this book because it pissed me off. It upset me. I could have thrown the book across the room because of certain things, I think, like values that I have in terms of relationships that are sacred to me anyway. Parent-child relationship, the tribalism sense, I find quite sacred. So if you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. If not, go read the book. But the first chapter, a lot of those things are either disrupted, disenfranchised, or just plainly they don't work. And it was really hard for me. I was like, why am I reading this? I don't want to read this, so I didn't read the book. And one of my friends, one of my best friends was like, you need to read it. I was like, I ain't reading this book. This book has upset me. And then 4 years later, last month, I don't know what reason or why I decided, but I'm a bit of a book hoarder, so I never got rid of the book. I was like, I'm going to read Homecoming. I think I'm ready to be pissed off now. I really think if I had read this book 4 years ago, I would have had some children by now. Listen, right? This book is so powerful in the sense that I've always ummed and ahed about creating bubbers. I'd happily adopt bubbers, but creating them, I've been a bit like, the world's in a tricky place. It's been in a tricky place for as long as I can remember, but I think it would, on an individual level, be really hard for me to explain to a child whatever the fuck is going on out there. Before the book even starts, we're given this like family tree that stems from one very incredible woman. And one thing that the book taught me that I don't necessarily think, I don't know because I've never spoken to Ya, but I don't necessarily think that was what she was trying to do. But what it did for me was understand the importance of getting the bigger picture around this stuff and the movement of stories in terms of, if my parents didn't do the jiggy, I wouldn't be here. If my parents' didn't do the jiggy, they wouldn't be. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's always a bigger story behind however we feel on an individual level about whatever things that those things are. English. Anyway. And for me, I was like, the story continues. This is just a massive story. It's a tapestry. And once we choose to remove ourselves from the tapestry, we're almost, I don't know if you all agree with me, I might be going way out of it here, but we're almost dishonoring the story that came before us. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not just gonna go out there and have bobbers because, it's gotta be a serious, a proper father figure. Because you know what, also reading this book, like, there are moments where fathers are ripped away from their children, and mothers also, and those kind of things we carry with us. But I guess that's not that's a voice note for not a voice note, that's a video for another day. But yeah, that's one of the things that this book made me feel. Well, you know what's amazing about this book is that each chapter is a new character. And we're getting it from the perspective of characters. So we could have actually travelled like, I reckon we'd probably go over 10 generations. Let me not count it now, I should have done that before. And I actually found it quite difficult in the beginning because I was like, when are we going to go back to Essie? When are we going to go back to Effia? Which we don't. Which by the time you get to the end of the book, you learn, it's the art of detachment as well. I think this writer is incredible. She was only 26 when it was published, which means she probably wrote it around 24, if not 23, if not earlier than that. And I'm one of the belief that it's a marathon, not a race. But sis, if you're doing this at 26, I don't know how anyone can write that, or how anyone can have that much capacity in their brain to write things that are so clear and vivid and moving. There's a line, right, where they're describing obviously a pot, right? And she writes, the fat back at the bottom of the pot started to crackle. The fat back at the bottom of the pot started to crackle. I mean, what? What a writer. What a writer. Every single level, every single character we meet and we engage with, their world is so clear. We go from Ghana to America. We're going all over everywhere was so clear. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, even the way she describes the characters, they felt like family members to me. I took so many notes, but there's this whole section which I'm gonna try and read. The characters are talking about history and power. So there's a character that has a scar on his face. And the boys, he's a teacher, and the boys he's teaching are umming and ahhing about the scar. And he goes, "What story have you heard about my scar?" You're asked, smiling still, hoping now to ease some of the child's growing fear. Peter cleared his throat and looked at the ground. "They say you were born of fire," he started. "That is why you are so smart, because you were lit by fire." Yor says, "Anyone else?" Timidly, a boy named Edem raised his hand. "They say your mother was fighting evil spirits from Asamando." Then William, "I heard your father was so sad by the Asante loss that he cursed the gods and the gods took vengeance." Another named Thomas, "I heard you did it to yourself so that you would have something to talk about on your first day of class." All the boys laughed, and Yor had to stifle his own amusement. Word of his lesson had gotten round, he knew. The older boys told some of the younger ones what to expect from him. Still he continued, making his way back to the front of the room to look at his students, the bright boys of the uncertain Gold Coast, learning the white book from a scarred man. "Whose story is correct?" Yor asked them. They looked around at the boys who had spoken, as though trying to establish their allegiance by holding a gaze, casting a vote by sending a glance. Finally, once the murmuring subsided, Peter raised his hand. "Mr. Agekum." Sorry, my Ghanaians. "We cannot know which story is correct." He looked at the rest of the class, slowly understanding. "We cannot know which story is correct because we were not there." Yor nodded. He sat in his chair at the front of the room and looked at all the young men. "This is the problem of history. We cannot know that which we were not there to see and hear and experience for ourselves. We must rely upon the words of others, those who were there in the olden days. They told stories to the children so that the children would know, so that the children could tell stories to their children, and so on and so on. But now we come upon the problem of conflicting stories. Kojo Nyako says that when the warriors came to his village, their coats were red, but Kwame Adu says they were blue. Whose story do we believe then?" The boys were silent. They stared at him, waiting. "We believe the one who has the power. He is the one who gets to write the story. So when you study history, you must always ask yourself, whose story am I missing? Whose voice was suppressed so that this voice could come forth? Once you have figured that out, you must find that story too. From there, you can begin to get a clearer, yet still imperfect picture. We're taught history according to those who want it to be taught that way, right? Those with the power. We have to go and figure out our own history, which is what this book definitely encourages in every single individual way. We all have to figure out our narratives, our story. Teacher tells the student, yeah, you can read a lot of books. I'm paraphrasing, by the way, this is what it said. But yeah, you know a good book when you feel the book. And I was reading it and I was going, I know what you mean. I know what that is. That because I felt this book, I know what that is. I cried my eyes out. It was just such a beautiful book to read. I was so moved and I was so changed. I was changed by this book. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking pen to paper. Because without, your fearlessness, vivaciousness, is that the word I'm looking for? I need to find out what that means. But you know what I mean? Like, I personally don't think I've ever read a book that was like that before. I don't think I've ever read a book like that before, where each chapter was a different character and we moved through life, at such pace, but not just one lives, many lives. I am in love with the character H, partially maybe because he's Nigerian, who knows? Is it H or H's grandbaby? No, I think it was H. Anyway, I was like, that's my man. Fictional character in a book. It is just an amazing book. I hope you read it. I hope you get to go on that journey that I did. You know what's funny is that whenever I read a book, I always feel envious that people get to read it with fresh eyes after. I wish I could read this again with fresh eyes. Read Homegoing. No, it wasn't H. It wasn't H. Sorry, it wasn't H. It was Sam. Sam's my boyfriend.